I held the ornate wedding invitation in my hand, the gold embossed letters gleaming under the soft lighting of our living room. The room was filled with the sweet fragrance of lilies, Sienna's favorite, but their scent now seemed almost cloying. "So, what do you think?" Sienna's voice cut through my thoughts. She was perched on the arm of our plush sofa, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. I hesitated, feeling a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. "About inviting Valeria?" "Yes, of course, about inviting Valeria," she said, rolling her eyes with a playful smile. "It's a bold move, don't you think? She'll be squirming in her seat." I tried to match her enthusiasm, forcing a smile. "Sure, it'll be interesting." Sienna's eyes narrowed slightly, catching my hesitation. "Interesting? John, it'll be more than that. It'll show her that we've moved on, that we're happier than she ever made you." I sighed, shifting uncomfortably. The knot in my stomach tightened further. Sienna's words were meant to be comforting, but they only reminded me of the complexity of my feelings. Was I really happier? And was this petty act truly necessary? "You really think it's a good idea?" I asked, my voice betraying my doubt. Sienna slid off the sofa and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "John, listen, Valeria hurt you. She left you without a second thought. This is our chance to show her that we've moved past it, that we're better off." I looked into her eyes, searching for some reassurance. "But what if it backfires? What if it just stirs up old feelings and causes more trouble?" She laughed softly, brushing a stray hair from her face. "Oh, come on. What's the worst that could happen? She shows up, feels awkward, and leaves. Meanwhile, we have our perfect day." Her confidence was almost convincing, but a small voice in the back of my mind continued to nag at me. "All right," I said finally, trying to sound more certain than I felt. "Let's do it." Sienna beamed, her smile bright enough to light up the room. "I'll send it out tomorrow. She won't know what hit her." As she left the room, humming to herself, I sank back into the sofa, the invitation still in my hand. The golden letters blurred as I stared at them, my mind drifting to memories of Valeria. Our relationship had ended abruptly, and seeing her again after all this time felt like reopening a wound that had never fully healed. Later that night, I found myself unable to sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts of Valeria and the upcoming wedding swirling in my mind. Sienna slept soundly beside me, her breathing deep and even. I envied her ability to let go of worries so easily. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and walked to the living room. The invitation lay on the coffee table, a stark reminder of the decision we had made. I picked it up, running my fingers over the embossed letters. Just as I was about to put it down, Sienna's voice startled me. "Can't sleep." I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her silhouette outlined by the soft glow of the hallway light. "Yeah," I admitted, "just thinking about the wedding." She walked over and wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "You're overthinking it, John. Everything's going to be perfect." I sighed, leaning into her embrace. "I hope so. I just want our day to be special." "It will be," she whispered, her breath warm against my neck. "Trust me." I nodded, trying to silence the doubts in my mind. As we stood there in the quiet of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that inviting Valeria to our wedding was a decision fraught with potential repercussions. And despite Sienna's reassurances, I couldn't help but wonder if we were setting ourselves up for more than we bargained for. The invitation arrived on a breezy Wednesday afternoon. I found it nestled among the usual stack of bills and advertisements, its elegant design standing out like a gem in a pile of rubble. My heart skipped a beat as I read the names embossed on the front: Sienna and John. John. His name still had the power to stir something deep within me, a mix of nostalgia and unresolved hurt. I tore open the envelope, my fingers trembling slightly, and unfolded the heavy cardstock. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Sienna Collins and John Turner." The words seemed to mock me, each one a small dagger to my already fragile heart. I sank into the nearest chair, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. Why had they invited me? What were they trying to prove? My phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a message from Maverick, my best friend, and the only person who knew the full extent of my history with John. Drinks tonight? Need to talk. I quickly typed back a response. Grateful for the distraction. Yes, please. Later that evening, I met Maverick at our favorite bar, a cozy place with dim lighting and an extensive cocktail menu. He greeted me with a warm hug, his presence immediately soothing my frayed nerves. "What's going on?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. I handed him the invitation, watching his eyes widen as he read it. "Wow. This is unexpected." "Tell me about it," I muttered, taking a sip of my drink. "Why would they invite me? It's like they're trying to rub it in my face." Maverick leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. Or maybe they're trying to show off how happy they are. Either way, it's their problem, not yours. "But should I go?" I asked, voicing the question that had been gnawing at me since I opened the envelope. "Why not?" Maverick shrugged. "Show them that you're over it, that you're not bothered by their little power play. And besides, you might actually have some fun." I raised an eyebrow. "Fun? At my ex's wedding?" He grinned. "Sure, why not? Take me as your date. We'll make it a night to remember." The idea was both terrifying and oddly appealing. Maverick had a way of turning any situation into an adventure, and maybe this was exactly what I needed to finally close that chapter of my life. "All right," I said, feeling a spark of determination. "Let's do it." Maverick smiled, raising his glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. The following days were a whirlwind of preparations. I wanted to look my best to show John and Sienna that I was thriving. Maverick accompanied me on a shopping trip, offering his unfiltered opinions on every dress I tried on. "This one," he said decisively, holding up a sleek, emerald green gown. "It brings out your eyes and makes a statement." I examined my reflection in the mirror, turning from side to side. "You think so?" "I know so," he replied, his tone confident. "You look stunning." I smiled, feeling a flicker of excitement. "All right, this is the one." The day of the wedding arrived with a brilliant sun shining down from a cloudless sky. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the strap of my dress for the umpteenth time. Maverick appeared behind me, straightening his tie and flashing me a reassuring smile. "You look stunning, Valeria," he said, his voice warm and steady. "John and Sienna won't know what hit them." I smiled back, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. "Thanks, Mav. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Well, you'll never have to find out," he replied, offering me his arm. "Shall we?" The drive to the venue was filled with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I couldn't help but wonder how John would react to seeing me. Would he be indifferent, surprised, or even a little remorseful? I tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the man sitting next to me, whose presence was a constant source of strength. The venue was a picturesque garden, adorned with flowers and twinkling lights. Guests milled about, sipping champagne and chatting animatedly. As we made our way through the crowd, I could feel eyes on us, curious whispers following in our wake. Santa spotted us first. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of something else, displeasure, insecurity, before she composed herself and approached us with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Valeria, Maverick, so glad you could make it," she said, her tone overly bright. "Thank you for inviting us," I replied, matching her smile with one of my own. "It's a beautiful wedding." John joined us then, his gaze flickering between me and Maverick. "Valeria, it's good to see you." "You too, John," I said, feeling a pang of emotion. He looked handsome in his suit, but there was a tension in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Maverick extended his hand to John. "Congratulations, man. Wishing you both all the best." John shook his hand, his smile tight. "Thanks, Maverick." As we moved to find our seats, I could feel Sienna's eyes boring into my back. I tried to focus on Maverick, on the pleasant hum of conversation around us, but the tension was palpable. It felt like the calm before a storm. I leaned in close to Maverick and whispered, "This might have been a mistake." Maverick shook his head, his expression resolute. "No, Valeria. We're here. Let's show them that you're strong and have moved on. Just be yourself." I took a deep breath, nodding. "You're right. Thanks for being here." "Always," he said, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. As we settled into our seats, the ceremony began. It was beautiful, a perfect blend of elegance and emotion. Sienna looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, and John seemed genuinely moved as he recited his vows. But as I watched them, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that this perfect facade was hiding cracks just beneath the surface. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, Maverick and I mingled with the other guests, enjoying the food and dancing to the lively music. For a while, I managed to forget about the awkwardness and simply have fun. But it wasn't long before the inevitable confrontation occurred. I was chatting with an old friend when I heard raised voices behind me. Turning, I saw Sienna and John arguing heatedly, their faces flushed with anger. My heart sank. This was exactly what I had feared. Before I could react, Sienna stormed over to me, her eyes blazing. "What are you doing here with him?" she demanded, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. I glanced at Maverick, who looked ready to intervene, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Sienna, we were invited. We're just here to celebrate your day." "Celebrate?" she spat, her eyes narrowing. "It feels more like you're here to gloat." "That's not true," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. "I came because I wanted to show that there's no hard feelings. To move on." Sienna looked unconvinced, but before she could say more, John stepped in. "Sienna, this isn't the time or place." "No, John, it is," she snapped, her eyes never leaving mine. "I need to know if this was your idea. Did you invite her to make me look like a fool?" John's face went pale, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he hadn't fully supported this plan. This was going to be a long night. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect summer day that seemed almost too good to be true. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the emerald green dress that Maverick had helped me pick out. It clung to my figure in all the right places, the color making my eyes pop. Despite my nerves, I had to admit that I looked good. Maverick appeared behind me, straightening his tie in the reflection. "You look incredible, Valeria," he said, his tone sincere. "Thanks, Mav," I replied, turning to face him. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." He gave me a reassuring smile. "You'll be fine. Just remember, you're doing this for you, not for them." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's go then." We arrived at the venue, a stunning garden filled with flowers and twinkling fairy lights. The guests were milling about, sipping champagne and chatting. As we made our way through the crowd, I could feel eyes on us, whispers following in our wake. I straightened my shoulders, determined to appear confident and unbothered. Sienna was the first to spot us. She froze for a moment, her smile faltering before she plastered it back on and approached us. "Valeria, Maverick, so glad you could make it," she said, her tone overly bright. "Thank you for inviting us," I replied, matching her smile with one of my own. "It's a beautiful wedding." Just then, John joined us. He looked sharp in his suit, but there was a tension in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Valeria, it's good to see you," he said, his voice tight. "You too, John," I replied, feeling a pang of emotion. Maverick extended his hand to John. "Congratulations, man. Wishing you both all the best." John shook his hand, his smile tight. "Thanks, Maverick." As we moved to find our seats, I could feel Sienna's eyes boring into my back. I tried to focus on Maverick and the pleasant hum of conversation around us, but the tension was palpable. It felt like the calm before a storm. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Sienna looked stunning in her white gown, and John seemed genuinely moved as he recited his vows. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness, wondering what might have been. But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the man beside me who had been my rock through all of this. Once the ceremony ended, the reception began in full swing. The garden was transformed into a fairy tale setting with twinkling lights and elegant decorations. Maverick and I mingled with the other guests, enjoying the food and dancing to the lively music. For a while, I managed to forget about the awkwardness and simply have fun. But as the night wore on, the tension between John and Sienna became more apparent. I was chatting with an old friend when I heard raised voices behind me. Turning, I saw Sienna and John arguing heatedly, their faces flushed with anger. My heart sank. This was exactly what I had feared. Before I could react, Sienna stormed over to me, her eyes blazing. "What are you doing here with him?" she demanded, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. I glanced at Maverick, who looked ready to intervene, but held up a hand to stop him. "Sienna, we were invited. We're just here to celebrate your day." "Celebrate?" she spat, her eyes narrowing. "It feels more like you're here to gloat." "That's not true," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. "I came because I wanted to show that there's no hard feelings. To move on." Sienna looked unconvinced, but before she could say more, John stepped in. "Sienna, this isn't the time or place." "No, John, it is," she snapped, her eyes never leaving mine. "I need to know if this was your idea. Did you invite her to make me look like a fool?" John's face went pale, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he hadn't fully supported this plan. "Sienna, let's not do this here," he pleaded, his voice low. But Sienna was beyond reason. "No, John, I want answers. Did you invite her because you still have feelings for her?" The crowd around us had fallen silent, all eyes on the unfolding drama. I felt like I was in a nightmare, unable to wake up. Maverick stepped forward, his expression serious. "Maybe we should take this somewhere private." Sienna rounded on him, her anger now directed at both of us. "And who were you to get involved? This has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," Maverick replied calmly. "Valeria is my friend, and I'm not going to stand by and watch her get attacked." Sienna looked like she was about to say something more, but John gently took her arm. "Sienna, please, let's talk about this later." She shook him off, glaring at both of us. "Fine, but this isn't over." As she stormed away, John gave me a helpless look before following her. The crowd slowly dispersed, the buzz of conversation picking up again, but the tension lingered in the air. Maverick turned to me, his expression filled with concern. "Are you okay?" I nodded, though I felt anything but. "Yeah, let's just get some fresh air." We made our way to a quiet corner of the garden, the cool evening air a welcome relief. I leaned against a tree, taking deep breaths to calm myself. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "I shouldn't have come." Maverick shook his head, pulling me into a comforting hug. "No, Valeria, you did nothing wrong. They invited you, and you came in good faith. This isn't on you." "But look at what happened," I said, my voice shaking. "Their wedding is ruined." Maverick pulled back, looking into my eyes with a seriousness that made me feel safe. "If their relationship is strong, they'll get through this. If not, then it was never going to last anyway." I nodded, trying to take comfort in his words. As we stood there, the sounds of the party continued in the distance, a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt inside. But despite the chaos, there was a small glimmer of hope. Maverick had been there for me as he always was, and in that moment, I realized how much his presence meant to me. Maybe, just maybe, this night could still hold some good. As we walked back to the reception, hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of strength. I wasn't alone in this. Maverick was by my side, and together, we could face whatever came our way. The atmosphere at the reception was strained. The confrontation had left everyone on edge, whispers and glances circulating like wildfire. Maverick and I tried to blend back into the crowd, but the tension followed us like a shadow. We found a spot near the bar, hoping a couple of drinks might take the edge off. Maverick ordered a whiskey, neat, while I opted for a glass of red wine. I could feel the eyes of the other guests on us, their curiosity palpable. So what now? Maverick asked, his tone casual but his eyes serious. I sighed, taking a sip of my wine. We tried to enjoy the rest of the evening, I guess. I don't want to give Sienna the satisfaction of thinking she scared me off. That's the spirit, Maverick said, raising his glass in a toast to resilience. I clinked my glass against his, feeling a flicker of resolve. But just as I started to relax, I spotted John and Sienna across the room, locked in another heated exchange. Their body language spoke volumes, Sienna's rigid posture, John's pleading gestures. This wasn't going to end well. As if sensing my gaze, John looked up and our eyes met. He muttered something to Sienna, who shot me a venomous look before storming off. John made his way towards us, his expression a mix of frustration and desperation. John, Maverick greeted him, his tone guarded. "Can I talk to you, Valeria?" John asked, ignoring Maverick. I glanced at Maverick, who gave a subtle nod. "All right," I said, setting my glass down. "Let's step outside." We walked to a secluded part of the garden, the cool night air a stark contrast to the heated emotions swirling around us. John ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I'm sorry about earlier," he began, his voice strained. "I didn't expect things to get so out of hand." "It's not your fault," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. Sienna was upset. Emotions are running high. John shook his head. "No, it is my fault. I should have put my foot down when Sienna suggested inviting you. I thought it might be a way to show that we had moved on. But clearly, it was a mistake." I studied him, the flickering lights casting shadows across his face. "Why did you go along with it, John?" He sighed, looking away. "I guess part of me wanted to prove something. To show you that I was happy that I had moved on. But seeing you here, it's brought up a lot of old feelings." I felt a pang of sympathy. "John, we both make mistakes in our relationship, but we've moved on, right?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and longing. "Have we? Because seeing you with Maverick, I don't know, it just made me realize how much I missed what we had." My heart ached at his words, but I forced myself to stay firm. "John, you're married now. You made your choice." He stepped closer, his expression earnest. "Did I? Or did I just settle because I was afraid of being alone?" I shook my head, stepping back. "This isn't the time or place for this conversation. You need to focus on Sienna and your marriage." Before he could respond, we heard a loud crash from the reception area, followed by raised voices. We rushed back to find Sienna standing near an overturned table, her face flushed with anger. "What's going on?" John demanded, moving towards her. Sienna glared at him, then at me. "I saw you, John. I saw you talking to her. What were you saying?" "That you still love her." The crowd had formed a wide circle around us. The music had stopped, and the air was thick with anticipation. I felt every eye on us, every whisper a sharp knife cutting through the tension. "Sienna, please," John pleaded, reaching out to her. She slapped his hand away, tears streaming down her face. "No, John, I'm done with the lies. If you still have feelings for her, just say it." John hesitated, his silence speaking volumes. The realization hit Sienna like a physical blow, and she stumbled back, her face contorted with pain. "You can't even deny it," she whispered, her voice breaking. Maverick stepped forward, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. "This isn't the time or place for this, Sienna." She rounded on him, her eyes blazing. "And you're just loving this, aren't you? Playing the hero, swooping in to save her." "That's enough," Maverick said firmly. "Valeria and I are here as guests. We didn't come to cause trouble." Sienna let out a bitter laugh. Trouble follows her everywhere. John moved towards her again, desperation in his eyes. "Sienna, let's just go somewhere and talk, please." But Sienna was beyond reason. She turned and ran, disappearing into the night. John stood there for a moment, torn between following her and staying to explain. Finally, he turned to me, his face a mask of regret. "I'm sorry, Valeria, for everything." Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me standing there with Maverick, the echoes of the night's chaos still ringing in my ears. Maverick squeezed my shoulder gently. "Are you okay?" I nodded, though I felt anything but. "Yeah, let's just go." As we walked to the car, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Sadness for what was lost, relief that it was finally over, and a flicker of hope for what might come next. Maverick stayed close by my side, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions. The drive home was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we finally pulled up to my apartment, Maverick turned to me, his expression serious. "Valeria, I know tonight was hard, but I'm here for you no matter what." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Mav. I don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled, that familiar warmth and reassurance in his eyes. "You don't have to worry about that. I'll always be here." As I watched him drive away, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The night had been a whirlwind of emotions, but through it all, Maverick had been my rock. And in that moment, I realized just how much he meant to me. The weeks following the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions and reflection. The fallout from Sienna and John's explosive confrontation left a lasting impact on everyone involved. As for me, I was determined to move forward and find peace. One sunny Saturday morning, I sat on my balcony, sipping coffee and watching the world go by. My thoughts drifted to Maverick, who had been my constant support through the chaos. I decided it was time to show him just how much I appreciated his presence in my life. Picking up my phone, I sent him a text. "Brunch at our favorite spot? My treat." His response was immediate. "You had me at brunch. See you in an hour." An hour later, I walked into our favorite cafe, a quaint little place with a cozy atmosphere and the best pancakes in town. Maverick was already there, sitting at our usual table, a grin spreading across his face as he saw me. "Hey, you," he greeted, standing up to give me a hug. "Hey yourself," I replied, hugging him back. "Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "So, what's the occasion?" I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I just wanted to thank you for everything. You've been amazing, and I don't know what I would have done without you." He looked genuinely touched. "You don't have to thank me, Valeria. I'm your friend. I'd do anything for you." Still, I insisted. "It means a lot." We ordered our food and spent the next hour talking and laughing, the easy camaraderie between us a balm to my soul. As the conversation lulled, Maverick looked at me, his expression turning serious. "Valeria, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, curious. "Have you thought about what's next for you? I mean, with everything that's happened, do you have any plans?" I took a deep breath, considering his question. "I've been thinking a lot about that, actually. I feel like I need a fresh start, something to help me move on completely." Maverick nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "What about your art? You've always been passionate about it. Maybe now's the time to focus on that." His words struck a chord with me. I had always loved painting, but it had taken a back seat to everything else in my life. Maybe it was time to reclaim that part of myself. "You know, you're right," I said, feeling a spark of excitement. "I've been neglecting my art for too long. I think it's time to dive back into it." Maverick's face lit up with a smile. "That's the spirit, and you know I'll be your biggest supporter." We finished our brunch, and as we walked out of the cafe, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Maverick's encouragement had reignited a passion in me that I thought I had lost. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my art. My apartment was soon filled with canvases and paints, the smell of turpentine and creativity filling the air. Maverick visited often, always bringing a fresh perspective and constructive feedback. One evening, as we were sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset, Maverick turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Valeria, have you thought about showcasing your work, like in a gallery?" I looked at him, surprised. "A gallery? I don't know if I'm ready for that." He smiled, his eyes filled with encouragement. "I think you are. Your work is incredible, and it deserves to be seen. Why not give it a shot?" The idea both excited and terrified me, but Maverick's faith in me gave me the courage to consider it seriously. Okay, I said slowly, I'll look into it. True to his word, Maverick helped me research local galleries and prepare a portfolio. His unwavering support and belief in my talent pushed me to take the leap. A few weeks later, I found myself standing in front of a gallery owner, presenting my work with a mixture of hope and nerves. To my astonishment, the gallery owner loved my pieces and offered to host a solo exhibition. I felt a rush of emotions, pride, excitement, and a sense of validation that I hadn't felt in a long time. On the night of the exhibition, Maverick was by my side, his presence a steadying force. The gallery was filled with people, all admiring my work. As I mingled with the guests, receiving compliments and praise, I felt a sense of accomplishment that was deeply fulfilling. At one point, Maverick pulled me aside, his eyes shining with pride. "Valeria, this is amazing. Look at all these people who love your work. You did this." I smiled, feeling tears of joy prick at my eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Maverick. Thank you for believing in me." He took my hand, his expression sincere. "I always will, Valeria." As the night drew to a close, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. With Maverick by my side and a renewed sense of purpose, I felt ready to embrace whatever the future held. And in that moment, surrounded by my art and the people who appreciated it, I knew that I was finally moving forward, leaving the past behind and stepping into a future filled with endless possibilities. The weeks following my art exhibition were a whirlwind of activity and emotions. The positive reception of my work led to more opportunities, and I was busier than ever. Yet, in the midst of this newfound success, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. One crisp autumn afternoon, I decided to take a walk through the park, seeking a moment of tranquility to gather my thoughts. The leaves had turned vibrant shades of red, orange, and gold, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of fallen foliage. I found a secluded bench and sat down, watching as children played and couples strolled by hand in hand. As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed with a message from Maverick. "Mind if I join you? I could use a break from work." I smiled, typing back a quick reply. "Of course, I'm at our usual spot in the park." A few minutes later, Maverick appeared, a coffee in each hand. He handed one to me with a grin. "Thought you might need this." "Thanks, Mav," I said, taking a sip. "You're a lifesaver." He sat down beside me, his expression turning serious. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" I sighed, leaning back against the bench. "Yeah, just doing a lot of thinking. Reflecting on everything that's happened." Maverick nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "It's been quite a year, hasn't it?" "That's an understatement," I replied with a wry smile. "But it's also been a year of growth. I feel like I've learned so much about myself." He looked at me, his eyes filled with curiosity. "Like what?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I've realized that I've been holding on to the past for too long. My relationship with John, the way things ended, it all kept me stuck. But now I feel like I'm finally moving forward, focusing on my art, embracing new opportunities. It's given me a sense of purpose." Maverick's smile was warm and encouraging. "I'm really proud of you, Valeria. You've come a long way." "Thanks, Mav. And I couldn't have done it without you," I said, feeling a rush of gratitude. "You've been my rock through all of this." He shook his head, his expression humble. "You've had the strength within you all along. I just helped you see it." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. Eventually, Maverick turned to me, a thoughtful look on his face. "So, what's next for you? Any big plans on the horizon?" I smiled, feeling a sense of excitement. "Actually, I've been thinking about starting my own studio. A place where I can create and maybe even teach others. I want to share my passion with the world." "That sounds amazing," Maverick said, his eyes lighting up. "And I have no doubt you'll make it a success." "I hope so," I replied, feeling a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "It's a big step, but I feel ready for it." Maverick nodded, his expression serious. You are ready, Valeria, and whatever you need, I'm here to support you. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My journey had been filled with challenges and heartache, but it had also led me to this moment of clarity and purpose. That evening, I returned home feeling inspired and motivated. I spent hours sketching out plans for my studio, envisioning a space filled with creativity and possibility. Maverick's unwavering support gave me the confidence to pursue my dreams with renewed determination. A few days later, I received an unexpected message from John. Hesitant, I opened it, unsure of what to expect. Valeria, can we meet? I need to talk. Curiosity and a sense of closure compelled me to agree. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, a neutral place where we could talk without distractions. As I walked in, I saw John sitting at a corner table, looking more composed than the last time we had seen each other. He stood up as I approached, offering a tentative smile. Valeria, he greeted, his tone sincere. Thank you for meeting me. Of course, I replied, sitting down. What did you want to talk about? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I wanted to apologize. For everything. The way I handled things with you, the wedding, I realize now how much I hurt you. I appreciated his honesty, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. It wasn't easy for either of us. He nodded, his expression earnest. I've been doing a lot of thinking too. Sienna and I were getting a divorce. It became clear that we weren't right for each other. I think, deep down, I was still holding on to feelings for you. I felt a pang of sympathy, but also a sense of relief. I'm sorry to hear that, John, but maybe it's for the best. We both need to move on and find our own paths. You're right, he said, a hint of sadness in his eyes, and I see that you've found yours. Your art, Maverick, you seem genuinely happy. I am, I admitted, smiling. It's taken time, but I feel like I'm finally where I need to be. John reached across the table, taking my hand in a gesture of reconciliation. I wish you all the happiness in the world, Valeria. You deserve it. Thank you, John, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I wish the same for you. We parted on good terms, the conversation providing the closure I hadn't realized I needed. As I walked home, I felt a renewed sense of freedom and clarity. The past was behind me, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. Later that night, I called Maverick, eager to share the news. Hey, Mav. Guess what? John and I had a talk. It was good. We finally got some closure. That's great, Valeria, he said, his voice warm with approval. I'm glad to hear it. Me too, I replied, feeling a sense of contentment. And I've made a decision. I'm going to start my own studio. It's time to take that leap. I knew you would, he said, his tone filled with pride. And you know I'll be right there with you, every step of the way. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. My journey had been tumultuous, but it had led me to a place of strength and self-discovery. With Maverick by my side and a bright future ahead, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. And in that moment, I knew that the best was yet to come.